For me, learning how to mix properly would be a priority, but also to learn more about arrangement, creative habits and workload planning. When you look at political music in historical context, from 70s protest songs to hip-hop and grime, one could argue that it has been at the root of bringing about tangible political and socio-economic change for the better. Is that a plugin you ever use? 5302 playlist is excellent as ever. You added some real gems in the latest refresh. Did you measure your room with REW or similar software? Where does reason stop for you and where does madness begin? No more giant updates that break software and VSTs, implying that Windows updates don't constantly break everything. Congrats for your Kickstarter. Really can't wait for that CD album. Mind-blowing response, isn't it? Would you focus more on Spotify-friendly music or DJ-friendly music 7 to 9 minutes? Is there any curious anecdote about your album making sessions? Hey guys, welcome to the Caine audio vlog. It is Friday. It's time for another Ask Me Anything. Usual rules apply. Comment anything you want below this video and I'll get back to you in next week's video. Before I look at last week's video, is there any house admin? Yes, Kickstarter. I'm blown away, honestly. So I'll let you into a secret. It's actually Thursday I filmed these. So I filmed it last Thursday and I'd actually launched it, I don't know, Wednesday, Thursday-ish, something. I'd only just launched it anyway. So I think at the time of recording the video, and I actually last week's video I recorded Thursday morning. And yeah, honestly, I kind of wasn't expecting it to. I'd set the target at that target because I thought, well, you know, I've got 30 days, I can get there. I'm fairly confident I can hit that target in 30 days. And I hit it in under 48 hours. I was blown away. And thanks to, I recognise some of the names from viewing these videos and commenting in these AMAs. So a huge thank you to you guys. Honestly, it does mean a lot. So yeah, I mean, I hit the target in 48 hours. So CD's getting done. So for any of you that haven't been following the story, it's still available now. I did limit the number because I'd based everything on prices of short runs, and I thought I'll just do a small batch for now and just see where we are, test the water with that. So this is a one-off exclusive run for Kickstarter, and then I'll perhaps move on to a pre-order through the website. I don't know, but the price will probably go up then. So yeah, so I kind of wanted to start with Kickstarter. So these CDs are getting done for you. I'm waffling again. For those of you that haven't been following the story, my album is out in September. It is not only my first full artist album, but it's the first release of my new record label. So putting my money where my mouth is, I'm putting everything into this. And I thought, as an aside, it'd be pretty cool to get a kind of a CD pressed of the album, if for no other reason than it being a souvenir of the first album on the first label, the first release of the label, I should say. Yeah, so there we go. So that's getting done. I have had the artwork and everything ready to go. It's all good. So it's all systems go from here. Yeah, there we go. That was a massive long waffle. Aside from that, I did update the Spotify playlist. Again, link will be below. I think that is it. I can't think of anything else. I've not written anything down, but that doesn't mean there isn't anything. Yeah, I think that's it for house admin. Welcome to the show. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you can see down there. No, up there. Can you see that? It's just my coaster. There we go. Right, let's get on with it. By the way, if you do want coasters, pretty sure I put them in the shop. Then 5302.co.uk/shop, and you can find yourself some there. I ordered some and they came through last week. Right, starting at the top, Caine. Let me sort this microphone out. Apologies if that made a horrible noise. Caine. Lol at the subtle phony Family Guy reference last week. Apple, high five. I'm glad you got it. This guy's a phony. Thanks for your take on royalties. Very useful stuff. Regarding the coaching, your concerns over time commitment make sense, and you should definitely be charging accordingly if you go ahead. I understand the imposter syndrome thing, but I'm sure that if you tested the water, you would get a weighty chunk of validation of your knowledge and skills pretty well immediately. Yeah, I think you're probably right. This is now turning into a therapy session for me. So tough. Yeah, I think you're probably right. I actually had a conversation with a good friend of mine who is also an artist manager, not my manager, today, and he mentioned with the Kickstarter thing that I've just been talking about that, that's got to be a good confidence booster, and I think it is. And I explained to him that honestly, launching the Kickstarter campaign, I explained to him earlier that I'd had this idea. I mean, for the followers of this channel, you'll know that I actually wrote my album. When did I finish it? Last year, November, something like that. And apologies if you can hear a dog barking. There's a dog next door, and it's exactly this time of day every day. He tends to bark a lot. I assume it's people walking their dogs down the road past it on the street or something, because the dog's out the front, the other side. But anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, so Kickstarter. I'd honestly, I wasn't really sure whether I was going to get anyone backing the campaign, and I actually set the goal to be far below the cost of getting the CDs pressed. But as I say, putting my money where my mouth is, I was getting them done anyway, really. I because the Kickstarter campaign really dictated how many would get done and in what time and whatever, and it changes a few things, but either way I was going to get some for me because I felt that was worthwhile. So I'd sort of quietly launched the Kickstarter campaign. I'd actually written it February this year, and I just didn't have the guts to press launch, because I didn't know whether anyone would back it. And then of course quarantine happened, and I thought, well, everybody's got no money and people are losing jobs. Is now the right time to be asking for people to back a campaign? And I wasn't sure, so I ummed and ahed, and obviously I launched it, and as I've already said several times already, the goal was met. So yeah, huge confidence booster. So I think you're right. If I started doing some coaching or one-to-one sessions, I think probably within a few sessions I'd actually start getting my confidence in there and realizing, oh, I do know what I'm doing. So yeah, you're probably right. For me, learning how to mix properly would be a priority, but also to learn more about arrangement, creative habits, and workload planning. So mixing, I think mixing is something I can teach. I think it's probably maybe a better thing to teach one-to-one rather than overall in video tutorials and stuff like that, because again, viewers of this channel will know I've done a mix down series on this channel, which was great and is great as an overview. I've done other ones for Sonic Academy, for example, as well, and I think they're good at getting the nitty-gritty on that specific track, but those rules don't always apply to everything, and I think that's kind of key to getting a good mix down, is that what works for one track doesn't work for every track. you know, if in one track I'm saying, oh, this bass needs boosting, you can't sit there going, right, boost all bass on every track, because that's not how it works. So yeah, I think those are the situations where one-to-ones are probably much more valuable, because we'd be going through your track and your mix down. So yeah, okay, I'm with you on that, and I think that's maybe a good one to start with. Arrangement's always a tricky one, but I think given going through a few different tracks, it's fairly easy for me to go, well, what's wrong with this arrangement, or what did you nail in this arrangement? And then creative habits and workload planning, I'm probably the last person you want to speak to about that. No, there's a few tips and tricks, but hopefully I've given out most of those in this channel. Hopefully in these AMAs I hope I give something valuable in each session. I don't know. Frankly, just having someone to kick my ass and hold me accountable would be useful. I can see that. Completely agree about artists being political. It pisses me off no end when people tell artists to keep out of politics. Why should artists have fewer rights to express a political opinion than the average person on Twitter? Yeah, so I know I'm agreeing with myself because you're agreeing with me, but on that note, I understand people saying keep out of politics. I do get it. And I also feel like sometimes, and this is where it becomes a grey area, is yes, everyone should have a right to express their opinion. Of course, that's what free speech is all about. But at the same time, wouldn't it be nice if that opinion was educated? Wouldn't it be nice if that opinion was an expert opinion? And I feel like we as humans, not just artists, not just whatever, but just humans in general, we've all lost the ability to listen to experts. I feel like two people have equal rights to an opinion, but that doesn't mean that those two opinions are of equal validity. And I think that's a careful line that we need to toe to an extent. So when it comes to artists expressing their political views, while they are free to express those political views, and they should be, I also think that maybe not everyone should be encouraged to express certain political views, because they might be misguided, misleading, etc. And that's left or right. I don't care. Bad information is bad information, whether it's used for one thing or another. So there we go. When you look at political music in historical context, from 70s protest songs to hip-hop and grime, one could argue that it has been at the root of bringing about tangible political and socio-economic change for the better. Yeah, I'd agree with that. If artists listen to the trolls telling them to butt out, we risk not having that benefit in the future. I suppose there's every chance that that's exactly what the trolls want. I don't know what trolls want. I think, generally speaking, trolls just want abrupt chaos, really. Shits and giggles, which, that's fine, but unfortunately it's at the expense of others, and just gets annoying. It gets tedious, to be honest. I'm also a big fan of Isotope, the company and their plugins. In fact, they've just updated BT's Stutter Edit to V2. Is that a plugin you ever use? It's not. I'm not sure if I've even ever tried it. I'm not. I know the name so well, but I can't picture the VST, so I don't know. I don't know. It's definitely not one that I use anyway. Obviously, otherwise I'd remember what it looks like at least. Cheers, Dom. Have a good one. P.S. 5302 playlist is excellent as ever. You added some real gems in the latest refresh. Thank you. So that was 4 days ago. Let's open Spotify. 530 Electronica 6 days ago. Right, okay, so you had just heard the current refresh. It's always hard because I film these videos technically 8 days before. I'm losing myself now. You get what I'm saying. I film these a week in advance, and I'm quite often up to 8 days behind in Spotify updates and stuff like that. Does that make sense? I have no idea. Anyway, there we go. Silent Warrior. I think I was late with the question last week. So again, I think, yeah, there was at least a question last week that I saw come in on the Thursday afternoon, evening, Friday morning, something, yeah, by which time I'd already recorded and uploaded. Did you measure your room with REW or similar software? I have a similarly sized room and bought new monitors, Dynaudio Lid 48. I measured the room and it doesn't look bad, but it's not perfect either. I have so first of all, your first question, Room EQ Wizard. I recommend it to everyone. I haven't done this room with Room EQ Wizard yet. I have been using SonarWorks Reference, which I bought and used in the back room of the house. Moved into this room, did some basic measurements, and my biggest test, in fairness, is just standing against each wall and listening, moving stuff around, listen, move stuff around, listen. Just use your ears. You can hear, you know, if you're playing reference tracks that you know inside out, you know what they should sound like, you know what a good mix sounds like. So yeah, I kind of judge a lot on that, and then I work from there. SonarWorks gave me, I think it was suggesting I had a spike at 40 hertz and a dip at 80, which would make sense. So it means that because of that, there's a standing wave. So it's about finding that standing wave and its location and correcting for it, which is something I've actually not got round to doing just yet. It wasn't a massive spike, and it's one that SonarWorks can correct. And because it's down at 40 and 80, I was kind of, it's not a huge deal right now. It's just something that I'm aware of. And yeah, so at the moment I've left it at that. However, what I will say is I'm yet to do part 3 of the studio build, which is all about the acoustics. And from what I've just been saying, you can probably understand why I haven't done part 3 yet. It's because I've been busy working and I haven't actually nailed the acoustics yet. So I'm kind of hesitant to make a video on getting acoustics done in a room when I haven't actually nailed the acoustics just yet. So there we go. However, Room EQ Wizard is definitely one of the pieces of software that I'll be going through in that video. I have 4 bass traps, 5 absorbers and 2 diffusers. I have nothing on the ceiling, a bit of carpet on the floor. Mixing engineer Andrew Sheps. So if you have the room same size as mine, 4 bass traps, 5 absorbers, okay, and 2 diffusers. You probably don't even need a diffuser. Yeah. Well, it's not going to do any harm, is it? So yeah, anyway. Mix engineer Andrew Sheps, Metallica, etc. said that he only has some carpet on the wall. He mixes more on headphones and then checks his mixes on his Tannoy monitors. In short, he would not make any effort because he knows his monitors so well and can judge that in a not super treated room. How far would you go with treatment? Where does reason stop for you and where does the madness begin? That's a big question. Where does reason stop for you and where does madness begin? That's a big question. So, okay. I think when it comes to treated rooms, generally I like my rooms fairly lively. So I don't tend to go overboard. I actually lugged in, I think I might have said this in a previous video, but I don't know which one. I lugged in all of my acoustic panels and absorbers and everything from my past studio, from my last proper studio, brought them into this room and ended up then taking a bunch of them out, and partly because this room's a fraction of the size of my last studio. But also because I didn't want to go overboard. You know, I could make this room completely dead if I wanted, but I don't like that dead space sound. I like a bit of liveliness to it. So I'm not over the top when it comes to acoustic treatment. I know if you go to a lot of online forums, for example, and you start asking about rooms, they'll say things like, oh, with a room of that dimension you'll never get a good sound, and or you could never mix professionally in such and such room or with such and such dimensions. When fact is look, I got my first ever record deal producing on a shitty Windows laptop that was burning red hot, plugged into some shitty home hi-fi speakers, and that was it. That my first, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 records were signed off the back of that. My first ever proper release with, at the time, a huge name, Rui da Silva, his Kismet label. I signed a couple of techno tracks to him to one of the sister labels of Kismet, and I'm fairly sure, all of those were done in a bedroom with, I had 2 hi-fis. This was the thing, I had 2 hi-fis and I split them, and both of them just cranked up really loud because I felt like more speakers equals more fun. There was no treatment in that room. There wasn't even a bed in that room, if I remember rightly, because I was sleeping on this weird, I don't even know what it was. It was kind of a sofa, not quite a bed, but not quite a sofa bed either. Look, the point is that anyone and everyone can work with whatever they've got. There's nothing can stop you really, other than your own imagination and skill to an extent. But I don't think, I guess what I'm trying to say is, there's always going to be restrictions somewhere in your career, skill set, path, whatever. There's going to be obstacles. So clearly, if you're in a perfectly treated room, obviously that's better. Obviously you want a perfectly treated room, but at the end of the day, unless you've got literally millions of dollars or the luckiest person on earth, those things are going to be pretty hard to come by. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much. And I kind of agree with Andrew Sheps there. At the end of the day, so long as you know your speakers and you've heard enough music, just listen to music. Listen what sounds good and what doesn't. Listen to things that should sound good, and you might find that certain frequencies are just a bit boomy in your room, or certain frequencies are just a bit hidden. So long as you're aware of that and you don't overcompensate, and that's the biggest problem, is people tend to then overcompensate. Sometimes you might get a standing wave at, like I've got a short one at 40 hertz. Well, I know 40 hertz sounds great. That can really sound nice. Around sort of 40, maybe 50 hertz, let's say, it can sound really good, especially in kicks. A deep 50 hertz thud in a kick can really sort of push through and cut through things. Well, I've got to be careful that I don't then go, oh, I'm loving this, and crank it all up, because that's not what's going to happen in other people's rooms. So I think so long as you're going into it and you're aware of that, then it shouldn't be too much of an issue. And I think the other thing to remember is that, someone like Andrew Sheps, he's mixing and not mastering, and it will go to a mastering engineer. So if, for example, there was a bit of a peak on one random kick in the middle of a track for whatever reason, it's going to a mastering engineer. They're going to catch that. So and this is why I've always said to all of the viewers of this channel, collaborate when you can. As much as I'm not a huge collaborative person, I'm all for people collaborating, whether it be, this is why I set up the Facebook group, if you remember. And if you're not a member, then go to the Caine Audio Facebook group, because I encourage people to swap remixes or mix downs or masters or whatever. Just have a go at it, because working with other people's work allows you to really sort of see inside what works and what doesn't. And I think it's a much better experience for everyone then. So, where does reason stop you and where does the madness begin? Somewhere in there, I don't know, is the honest answer. Like I say, so I've got that 40 and 80 hertz issue at the minute. I'll iron it out. At the moment, I think it's like a 4 dB spike, so it's significant. It's not one that I'll ignore. And I'll use, for now, I'm using SonarWorks reference to iron it out, but I'd rather not use anything to iron it out. I'd rather, you're getting your money's worth from SonarWorks when you're able to stop using SonarWorks. That's kind of the deal with it, I think. So, that'd be ideal, but I think I'll be able to get it down to maybe 1 or 2 dB, and I'm fine with 1 or 2 dB of a spike here or there, because you can work with it. You've got ears, you've got a brain, you know what. You just bring something down 1 or 2 dB down from where you'd like it in your room. So there we go. In the recording forums, they make it atomic science. Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's exactly what I said. In the forum, look, just ignore the forums. The forums are full of like hardcore nerds. There are some forums in particular which I eye up and use occasionally, but you need to take everything with a pinch of salt. There is always going to be someone that will argue the case for your room being 1 millimeter bigger, or your walls need to be 1 kilo per cubic meter more dense. Otherwise, you could never produce a record. Well, it's bullshit. Yes, there's going to be restrictions. Yes, there's going to be limitations. But that doesn't mean that you can't create good art. And even more importantly, a good song is a good song. The rest can follow suit. So there we go. That's my view on that. A duck. No more giant updates that break software and VSTs, implying that Windows updates don't constantly break everything. Yeah, I get it, but I still kind of disagree. I think Windows updates are fewer and further between, or major updates, I should say, because they're only now on Windows 10, having skipped Windows 9. So yeah, I don't think the major Windows updates change too much, but I also think that comes with disadvantages as well. From a dev's perspective, it's probably great, maybe, but it also means that everything has to be backwards compatible with everything, and that can be quite traumatic for legacy devs. So there's a lot of stuff that Apple do that make me go, why? I mean, Catalina not installing anything 32-bit. When I first got this iMac and couldn't install anything 32-bit, I think I mentioned even last week with the Ableton 9 nightmare scenario. You just, it gets so stressful, but there's a reason for it. And actually, now I've got all the 64-bit versions and I've just worked around. Well, in fact, this is proof of what I was about to say, is that once you've worked out a 64-bit version of something or an alternative to something. So I'll give you an example. In fact, UAD2 stuff, I couldn't, because I was using a PCIe slot in my Mac Pro, which iMac doesn't have. There was a bunch of stuff that I now couldn't use, and I found alternatives, and I'm actually quite happy I forgot about UAD2. And what I was going to say is I'm sure there are others that I can't think of now, and that kind of speaks volumes in that I can't think of what those things were. So I've obviously learnt to live without them, and therefore maybe it wasn't quite as big a deal as I thought. But I ran out of time there. I can't, because my camera is further away in this room, being much bigger than the back room of the house, so the time on the screen is tiny and I can't really see it from here. what was I saying? Yeah, so the developers of software for macOS can just focus on 64-bit. They don't need to go, oh, does this work on 32-bit? Oh, should we make it backwards compatible with X, Y, and Z? Oh, should we still make it work with Pentium chips? You know, it's just not in there. And this is why, for example, when you look at, like, is it WWDC, the developers conference that Apple put on every year? I don't know if you've ever watched any of those keynote speeches. They always, when they're announcing like the new iPhone and all of those sorts of things, have you ever noticed that they always plug at the beginning about how many downloads they've had, how many billions of dollars they've made, how many millions of iPhone units and iOS devices there are in active use? And one of those, amongst all of those figures, one of the figures they always brag about is what percentage of people are currently running the latest OS or iOS. And for a while that always hit me as, why does anyone give a shit about that? But the reason is because it's the developer conference. It means all the developers are sat there going, oh, thank God we only have to work on one bit of software. Let's make it work on macOS X dot whatever, and anything else can just go away. So for example, the devs at Ableton don't have to sit there going, oh, is this 32-bit compatible? Oh, what if someone's using a Pentium chip something or other from 1998? Well, it doesn't matter, it's just not supported. So if it runs on macOS whatever the latest version is, it runs on macOS whatever the latest version is, and that's that. So yeah, there we go. It's annoying for us consumers, but actually we benefit in the long run, I think is what I'm trying to say. Something like that. Excuse me, sorry. Surprisingly, so I can see Cavacay has replied, surprisingly not so much these days. My Windows 10 installations over the past 4 years have been solid. I think I've had one update in that time that broke something, and it was easy to fix. I'm as shocked as anyone about that. Been using Windows, Linux and macOS for about 20 years, so I've had my fair share of Windows nightmares in the past. But don't get me wrong, I'd be happy to unceremoniously dump Windows if it wasn't the best option for me right now. macOS stability, on the other hand, seems to have gone off a cliff in the past few years. Utterly bizarre to find myself writing this, but that seems to be the way things are these days from my limited viewpoint at least. Yeah, it is. I think I went off on a tangent last week, so I'm not going to do it again with the whole Windows Mac thing. But for me, Mac always, when I moved to Mac in the first place, nearly 20 years ago, it did everything for me, and it was that closed environment, but everything just worked and it was great and I had no complaints. Now it's just not the case. They don't... I honestly, I don't know what it is, but it feels like since Steve Jobs left, I can't imagine it is, because it's not like Steve Jobs invented all of their devices and all of their software. I doubt he had much input at all towards the end, but I don't know what it is, but it does feel like now. Back then, Mac updates, they just happened, and you never even considered it. It wasn't an issue. Whereas now everybody's like, oh, can I do this update? Any other producers tried it yet? I don't want to go first, which is a bit crap. Fanfan87, salut Dom, Apple, high five. Congrats for your Kickstarter. Really can't wait for that CD album. Mind-blowing response, isn't it? Will they be hand-signed? Thank you very much, first of all. I am looking forward to sending them out, to be honest, and hearing what people think of them. So yeah, it is a mind-blowing response. I'm not going to repeat myself too much, like I always do, but yeah, no, I am blown away. Will they be hand-signed? I thought about this the other day, and maybe I should have put a different option to order a signed one rather than a non-signed one, because there will probably be some people who would love to have my signature on it, and there will probably be some people that go, oh, well, you've just ruined a perfectly good album cover. and I don't know who those people are. So I think Kickstarter lets you do like a survey to gather these things at the end. So maybe I'll try and squeeze that in as a question to see if people, if I can maybe have a yes no tick box or something there. So I'm more than happy to sign stuff if people want it signed. Aside from that, I'll probably have something in there with the CD, so it's not the signed CD itself, just because I don't want to ruin someone's perfectly good brand new CD by me scribbling my name on there like a 3-year-old. Speaking of coaching and academy, what do you think of the growing online courses proposing coaching making music? Isn't it kind of a hypocrisy earning money on an almost unachievable dream nowadays, considering the tiny amount of people reaching the stage of living their passion with music? I disagree with that as well. I make a living from music. I'm not world famous. I'm not. If you booked me to headline a festival, your festival would be a failure. It's as simple as that. I'm not David Guetta or Justin Bieber. I'm struggling to think of famous people here. You get what I'm saying? And yet I make a living out of music. Music is what pays my bills, my mortgage and whatever else. So I think there are a lot of people, don't get me wrong, I'm incredibly lucky to be in the position that I'm in. But I think there are a lot of people out there who are able to make money from music and make a living from music without being super rich or super famous or whatever. And I hope that's what those online courses teach you, maybe, about other avenues. But yeah, I know I've talked about this, not online courses, but I've talked about like university courses and things where they teach you to DJ and they teach you to produce and whatever. And I think those generic courses and tutorials are good to a limit, but there is a very definite limit. They can't teach you to have a personality. They can't teach you to build a brand. They can teach you how to maybe develop a brand, but they can't teach you how to come up with that idea in the first place. They can't teach you to be creative. They can give you the tools to be creative, but they can't teach you to be creative. So I've always kind of struggled with those things, really. The online coaching things, I think it's a difficult one. Like I say, I'd happily give someone constructive feedback on their music and critical feedback, and I can talk about the science of the music, the engineering of the music and whatever. But what I can't talk about is whether this is going to become a number one hit single. I might think it could, I might think it couldn't, but my opinion on whether it should or shouldn't be a number one hit single is irrelevant to whether it actually becomes a number one hit single. So I think that's kind of an important line to draw with those sorts of things. But you know what, there's a lot of people in the music industry that are not on stage, and I think that's also really important to remember. Whether it be sound engineers or the stage engineers or stage hands or sound designers or film composers, or there's so much music on so much things these days that musicians are always needed one way or another. I hope anyway. If you were a beginner in the industry as a techno/progressive house artist in 2020, would you, in fact, I can see my battery is running low. I'm just going to quickly change out the battery. I'll be back in a second. I could see the battery wasn't full when I first hit record at the beginning of this session. I didn't think I'd be going on for this long. Right, where were we? If you were a beginner in the industry as a techno/progressive house artist in 2020, would you focus more on Spotify-friendly music, radio edit, short tracks using classic sounds, etc., or DJ-friendly music, 7 to 9 minutes long tracks, taking more artistic risks? In other words, would you bet more on being discovered by the public or being discovered by the artists? Being Spotify tracklisted or 1001 tracklisted, playlisted or podcasted? Does that word exist? It exists, I think. I don't know. Have a good weekend. Cheers. You too. What a good question. One that I don't know the answer to. If I was starting in 2020, I think you've got to choose your end goal. I think you could make some serious money and get some serious listeners, etc. on Spotify without being a big performing DJ on stage, or without even being known by other DJs, although most DJs use Spotify. But you may or may not get noticed for the stage. Whereas if you're a performing DJ, you're going to want... I mean, you can have both, I think. You know, if you look at Spotify playlists, there are... I guess you'd just do a radio edit, wouldn't you? Yeah, I don't think it's one or the other, if I'm honest. I think you can do both. You know, start with, if you want both, then start with the 7, 8, 9 minute versions. Go wild. And then each time you sign that track to a record or release that track or whatever, just make a radio edit, make a cut down version, make something, and go wild with the radio edit as well. You know, don't just chop off the beginning and the end, the bits the DJs would mix. You know, maybe move one of the breakdowns to a different position, just play with the arrangement somewhat. You know, grab a radio edit of a track that you really, really like and copy that arrangement, whether it's, you know, bridge, chorus, verse, whatever breakdown, you know, just copy the structure of where things are, where the beats come in and whatever. And use that as a kind of a template of what you think can work, and then mute that track and listen to your track in that structure and see if it works. There's nothing wrong with releasing both of those. So as for what I would focus on, again, both, I think. So I'll speak from a 5302 point of view, because with my label starting in 2020, this was kind of the point of the label, was that how would you do things different, and the focus is really on things like Spotify playlisting and stuff like that, but it's about you know, we're also focusing on background work as well, and this is kind of the point, is that at the front end of 5302, you know, we focus on Spotify. Spotify is really the links I'll be pushing and whatever and sharing with people, and I think that's important. It's a great place to listen to new music. But the music will also be available on YouTube or wherever, really. You know, if people want to buy it on, maybe it'll be on Beatport. I don't know. I don't care for Beatport. But if it's there, it's there. As for being discovered by artists, I hope that artists will discover 5302 by just enjoying the music and not necessarily needing to DJ with it. In the same way as I'm a big fan of Noisier, but I've never played a drum and bass set in my life. I guess that's kind of my point. So yeah, there we go. Francesco Di Carlo, thank you, concrete and inspirational as always. Is there any curious anecdote about your album making sessions? What would you recommend to a beginner? I think they're two different questions. No, I don't think there's any anecdote about my album, other than the fact that it took me nearly 2 years to get right. And at one point I'd written about 30 tracks and then binned about 20 of those, and then wrote three more tracks. I think I made it to about 13, and then decided these 3 new ones change the narrative of everything. So I had to then go, I'll get rid of 6 and then write 5 more. And so I kept sort of writing a new one and taking out 2, and then I write 1 new and take out 2, and it kind of yeah. But as for actual anecdotes, I don't think there are any yet. I guess we'll find out in time. What would you recommend to a beginner who wants to deliver some presentable sounding demos? I mean, especially the mix. I'd probably answer, start following Dom Caine. Well, high five for that. Cheers. I can see someone's replied. Fan87 going, start following who? I was about to go, who? But yeah, me. What would I recommend to a beginner who wants to deliver some presentable sounding demos? Do you know what? I would say, first of all, don't worry too much. I would also say sit on it for as long as you can. If you write a piece of music and you think it's the best piece of music you've ever written and the best mix you've ever done, don't listen to it for maybe 2 weeks. Listen to some of your other productions. Definitely listen to other people's music, and definitely listen to some of your other pieces. It could be older, could be some of your worst work. Write some new pieces, and then listen to the one you did 2 weeks ago or whatever, and then ask yourself, is it still the best one you've done? If it is, great. That's your demo. It's ready to go. Just get it out there. Don't worry too much about the tiny details, because they're only details to you. They're irrelevant to other people. Yeah, I would also say try and stay 1 track behind. So if you've just finished a piece of music and you think it's the best piece of music you've ever written, great. Hold that on your desktop and just leave it there. Now write another piece of music, and that piece of music might be the best thing you've ever done, or it might be the second best, whatever. But when you finish that, then go back and listen to the other one and go, is this still good? If it's still good, great. That's your cue to go, right, get this finished, and off it goes. I think by holding yourself back and judging yourself by your new piece of work, you can compare. And I think that's one of the things that ties in maybe with the album, is that, you know, we all, and I've said this before, we all measure ourselves by, you know, how much further we've come in the last 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, whatever. You know, if you find you're constantly improving every week, then you're probably not quite ready to be sending your music out. If you're making those leaps every 6 months to a year, you're in a good position, you're doing well. And yeah, so I think it's a tricky one. But with my album, you know, it took 2 years because I was still finding my feet, and I knew what I wanted to express, and I knew what my story was for the album, but I needed to be able to write the music to do that, and I needed it to be consistent. And I also, so I don't like to write using the same things all the time, and I'm very aware that in the last 5 years there've been a few of my tracks that sound very similar, and that bugs me. And the last thing I want is a whole album for everything to sound similar. But at the same time, I want an album where everything ties in. So it was a really tricky thing to achieve, to get 10 individual pieces of work to sound individual enough where they don't just sound like it's the same track on repeat, but at the same time to tie in thematically, I suppose. So yeah, that I would say is how to get your demos sounding presentable, is to just hold back until you've written another piece, and then ask yourself, right, is that last one, was that still good enough? Because if you've written a new piece and you still think they're both good, great, not a problem. That first one is definitely good enough. But if you've written, let's call it piece 1, and then you write piece 2, and you listen to piece 1 again, and you go, oh, this is rubbish now, I've listened to it compared to piece 2, then piece 1 was maybe never that good in the first place. So now hold piece 2, write piece 3. Once you've finished piece 3, listen to piece 2, and then go, is it still good? If it's still good, great, that was a good piece of music. If it now is terrible compared to piece 3, then maybe piece 2 wasn't quite as good as you thought. And just keep going. But yeah, you've got to draw a line somewhere at the end of the day. I would say for anyone out there who is just absolutely 100% stuck on a mixdown, get someone else to do it. Swap it with a friend. Ask them if you can do a mixdown for them. They do a mixdown for you. If you're kind of both in the same music, same league, same skill set, whatever, or you're just good mates, just swap a mixdown with each other, and see how that gets on. Because sometimes the worst thing you can do is just try and mix your own music. Sometimes you're better off just giving it to someone else and going, you do it, you deal with that, I'm done with it, and then you can get it back, and you might get it back and go, well, this isn't how I wanted it at all, and in which case now you know what you did want. So yeah, hopefully that helps. That, my friends, is it for this week. Yeah, it's been the best part of an hour already. So yeah, let's tie it up there. Thank you to everyone who has watched it this far in. If you are looking for a high five in next week's video, comment the word boom, because Mark Rebele is saying the Boom Room full show. So there we go. Boom. I'm pretty sure we've had that before, but whatever. Anyway, thanks again, and have a good weekend, and I'll see you same time next week. Cheers.